The awakening protocol, the silence of deep space, was broken by an alarm that hadn't sounded in over a century. Captain Alina Vasquez jerked awake in her quarters aboard monitoring station EPS, her trained reflexes already pulling her from the narrow bunk before her conscious mind fully processed the emergency tone. The red warning lights cast dancing shadows across the cramped living space as she grabbed her uniform jacket and rushed toward the command center. Report. Alina barked as she entered the central hub, her dark hair still disheveled from sleep. The monitoring station hummed around them, a collection of advanced sensors and communication arrays positioned at the edge of human space, designed to watch for threats that everyone hoped would never come. Lieutenant Sarah Torres looked up from her console, her young face pale with excitement and concern. Captain, we're receiving a transmission on the old diplomatic frequencies, the same ones used during the Corvani negotiations 3,000 years ago. Alina felt her blood chill. Every officer in the human space navy knew about the Corvani peace accords, though most considered them ancient history. 3 millennia ago, when humanity had barely managed to establish colonies on a dozen worlds, they had encountered the vast Corvani Empire. The aliens had been amused by humanity's primitive technology and limited expansion, agreeing to a peace treaty that essentially told humans to stay in their small corner of the galaxy while the Corvani continued their business elsewhere. Are you certain it's authentic? Alina asked, moving to stand behind Torres at the communication station. The encryption matches our historical archives perfectly, Captain, and the transmission is coming from the Corvani home system, exactly where our records indicate it should. Dr. James Chen emerged from his laboratory, still wearing his research coat over rumpled clothes. The xenobiologist had been working late again, studying the few remaining artifacts from humanity's first contact with alien life. His expertise in alien cultures made him invaluable to the monitoring station, though he hadn't expected to need those skills for anything more than academic research. What's the content of the message? Chen asked, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he approached the console. Torres hesitated. You should probably hear this for yourself, sir. She pressed a sequence of keys, and the speakers crackled to life. The voice that emerged was clearly artificial, translated from the original Corvani language by ancient human diplomatic software. The words carried an unmistakable tone of authority and contempt. Humans of the third planetary system from the star you call Sol. This is War Prime Zethrak of the Corvani Imperial Fleet. The peace accords established by your primitive ancestors are hereby dissolved. Your species has existed in our galaxy for too long without proper oversight. Alina exchanged glances with Chen, noting the confusion in his eyes. The original Corvani representatives had been described as dismissive, but not actively hostile. The message continued. You will prepare for integration into the Corvani Empire. Your colonies will be evaluated for resource extraction potential. Your population will be relocated to designated worlds where you may continue to exist under proper supervision. You have 72 of your rotational periods to acknowledge your compliance. Failure to respond appropriately will result in the implementation of standard conquest protocols. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Alina stared at the communication console, her mind racing through the implications. After 3,000 years of peace, the Corvani were not just ending their treaty, they were preparing for war. Captain Torres said quietly, "There's more." The message was sent simultaneously to Earth, Mars, the Europa colonies, and every major human settlement. They know exactly where we are. Chen removed his glasses and cleaned them nervously. a habit Alina had noticed whenever the scientist was processing disturbing information. "This doesn't match the historical profiles," he muttered. The original Corvini representatives expressed no interest in conquest. They viewed humanity as too primitive to bother with, like insects beneath their notice. "Maybe they've changed their minds," Alina suggested grimly. "Or maybe," Chen said slowly, "they never intended the peace to be permanent. Think about it from their perspective. 3,000 years ago, we had wooden ships and metal swords. We were no threat to anyone. Why waste resources conquering us when they could simply wait for us to develop into something more useful?" The implications hit Alina like a physical blow. "You're saying they've been waiting for us to grow up so they could harvest us? It would make sense from a galactic empire standpoint. Why conquer primitive tribes when you can wait for them to build cities worth taking?" Torres spoke up from her station. "Captain, I'm receiving priority communications from Fleet Command. They're requesting immediate strategic assessments from all border stations." Alina nodded grimly. "Patch me through to Admiral Webb at Central Command." The main display flickered to life, revealing the weathered face of Admiral Marcus Webb. Behind him, Alina could see the bustling activity of the fleet's primary command center on Mars. Officers moved with purpose between holographic displays showing the positions of human ships throughout known space. "Captain Vasquez." Webb's voice was calm but strained. "I assume you've received the Corvini ultimatum." "Yes, sir." Dr. Chen believes this may have been their plan all along. Webb nodded grimly. "Our xenoarchaeologists are reaching similar conclusions. The question is, do they have any idea what humanity has accomplished in the last 3 millennia? Alina found herself smiling despite the gravity of the situation. "I don't think they do, sir. Their message referred to us as primitive and mentioned our limited expansion. They seem to think we're still using chemical rockets and living in small settlements." "Excellent," Webb said, his expression brightening. "Dr. Chen, what do you know about Corvini intelligence gathering?" Chen stepped forward. "Based on our historical records, they're methodical but incredibly slow to adapt. Their empire has existed for over 50,000 years, but their technology and culture have remained relatively static. They probably haven't bothered to update their information about humanity since the original treaty, so they think they're dealing with Bronze Age farmers with a few spaceships." Alina observed. "Essentially, yes. From their perspective, we should still be struggling to maintain colonies on our neighboring planets." Webb's grin was predatory. "Captain, I want you to prepare a response to the Corvini ultimatum. Something appropriately diplomatic." "What kind of response did you have in mind, sir?" "The kind that politely informs them that they might want to update their intelligence reports before making threats." Alina felt her own smile growing. 3,000 years ago, humanity had possessed perhaps a dozen interstellar vessels and colonies on fewer than 20 worlds. Today, human settlements stretched across more than 800 systems. The Terran Federation encompassed millions of worlds, artificial habitats, and research stations. Human technology had advanced from chemical rockets to quantum displacement drives, from radio communications to instantaneous neural networks spanning galaxies. "I'll prepare something appropriate, sir," Alina said. As Webb's image faded from the display, Alina turned to her crew. "Torres, I want you to compile a data package for our Corvini friends. Include current human population figures, territorial extent, and a technical overview of our defensive capabilities. Asterisk all of it, Captain." Torres asked, her eyes widening. All of it. Let's see how they react when they discover that they're primitive. Humans have colonized more worlds than their entire empire and possess technology that makes their warships look like museum pieces. Chen chuckled softly. Captain, this could be interesting. The Corvani Empire built their entire identity around being the oldest, most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Learning that a species they dismissed as irrelevant has surpassed them might cause some significant cultural shock. Good, Alina replied firmly. Maybe it's time someone reminded them that age doesn't always equal wisdom, and that underestimating humans has historically been a very poor decision. Torres worked at her console, compiling the massive data package that would accompany Elena's response. The numbers were staggering even to humans who lived with them every day. 800 billion humans spread across nearly 1,000 star systems. Industrial complexes that could construct entire fleets in days. Research facilities that routinely manipulated matter at the quantum level. Defensive networks that could monitor and protect vast swaths of space simultaneously. Package ready. Captain, Torres announced. Alina stood before the communication console, considering her words carefully. This message would either prevent a war or start one, depending on how the Corvani chose to interpret humanity's response. Or Prime Zethrak of the Corvani Imperial Fleet, she began, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to command. This is Captain Alina Vasquez of the Terran Federation Deep Space Monitoring Command. We have received your message regarding the dissolution of the peace accords. She paused, glancing at Chen, who nodded encouragingly. Asterisk. We appreciate your notification, though we must point out that your intelligence regarding human civilization appears to be significantly outdated. We have prepared a comprehensive data package that should bring your understanding of humanity up to current standards. We believe you will find the information quite illuminating. Elena's tone remained diplomatic, but there was steel beneath the courtesy. We look forward to your updated position once you have reviewed the relevant facts. Until then, we remain committed to peaceful resolution of any misunderstandings that may have arisen from incomplete information. She gestured to Torres, who transmitted the massive data package along with Elena's response. As the signal raced toward the Corvani home system, Alina couldn't help but wonder what the alien war leaders would think when they discovered that the primitive species they intended to conquer had quietly become one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The next 72 hours would determine whether wisdom or pride would guide the Corvani response. Outside the observation ports of Epsilon 7, the stars remained unchanged. But Alina knew that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted dramatically. Humanity was no longer the weak, divided species that had signed a treaty out of fear 3,000 years ago. They had become something far more dangerous, a civilization that had learned to grow, adapt, and thrive, while others remained static. The Corvani were about to discover what 3 millennia of human progress really meant. Asterisk. The price of underestimation to 8 hours after Captain Vasquez transmitted humanity's response to the Corvani ultimatum, the universe held its breath. Across human space, civilian traffic continued its normal patterns, while military vessels quietly repositioned themselves according to contingency plans that had been theoretical exercises just days before. On monitoring station Epsilon 7, Alina stood before the main display, watching long-range sensors track an approaching fleet that defied every assumption about Corvani technology. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, Lieutenant Torres announced, her voice tight with controlled amazement. 57 vessels, Captain, but they're huge. The lead ship alone is registering at over 15 kilometers in length. Dr. Chen whistled softly from his position at the science station. That's 3 times larger than anything in our historical records. They've been busy during their long sleep. Alina nodded grimly. The approaching Corvini fleet was impressive by any measure, but what concerned her more was the speed of their arrival. Either they had been much closer to human space than anyone realized, or their faster-than-light travel had improved dramatically since the original contact. Time to intercept, Alina asked, at current velocity. Approximately 6 hours until they reached the outer sensor perimeter. Torres replied. The communication console chimed with an incoming priority signal from Fleet Command. Admiral Webb's image materialized on the main display, but this time he was aboard his flagship, the massive dreadnought Resilience. Behind him, Alina could see the bridge activity that indicated a ship preparing for potential combat. Captain Webb began without preamble. I trust you're monitoring the approaching fleet. Yes, sir. 57 vessels, significantly larger than our historical records suggested possible. Indeed. It seems our Corvini friends have been more active during their supposed hibernation than we assumed. However, I have some information that might interest you. 3 hours ago, we received a second transmission from War Prime Zethrak. Alina felt her pulse quicken. What was their response to our data package, sir? Webb's expression was carefully neutral, but Alina caught a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. They accused us of falsifying the information. According to Zethrak, no species could advance as rapidly as our records indicate. They believe we're attempting to deceive them with fabricated data. Chen stepped forward. Admiral, that's actually consistent with their psychological profile. The Corvini have built their entire civilization on the concept of gradual, controlled progress over enormous timescales. The idea that humanity could advance faster in 3,000 years than they have in 50,000 would be literally incomprehensible to them. Which brings us to our current situation, Webb continued. They're coming to conduct what they call a verification inspection of human capabilities. They intend to examine our colonies and technology personally to determine the truth of our claims. Alina found herself smiling despite the tension. An inspection, sir. Indeed. War Prime Zethrak was quite specific. They will evaluate our actual technological level and adjust their conquest plans accordingly. Apparently, they consider the possibility that we might be telling the truth to be so remote that they're willing to risk a small fleet to investigate. Torres looked up from her console. Captain, I'm detecting additional vessels dropping out of hyperspace. The fleet count is now up to 84 ships. Alina watched the tactical display as more Corvini vessels appeared. The ships were undeniably impressive, their alien design both elegant and menacing. But as she studied their formation and approach vectors, she realized something that made her smile broaden. Admiral, she said slowly. Are they approaching in a standard battle formation from 3,000 years ago? Webb nodded. Our tactical analysts noticed the same thing. Their fleet doctrine appears to be unchanged since our first contact. They're using the same strategies, the same ship classifications, even the same communication protocols. 50,000 years of empire, Chen mused. And they're still fighting the same way they did when they first achieved interstellar travel. It's remarkable, really. Most species would have evolved their tactics significantly over that time span. Alina studied the approaching fleet with new eyes. The Corvani had impressive ships and superior numbers, but they were operating with assumptions that were millennia out of date. They had no idea what they were really facing. Captain Torres announced, "Incoming transmission from the lead Corvani vessel." "Put it through," Alina ordered. The main display shifted to show the interior of what was obviously an alien warship. War Prime Zethrak was indeed impressive. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with the characteristic crystalline exoskeleton that had been described in historical records. His forearms moved with careful precision as he operated controls that appeared to be grown rather than manufactured. "Human Commander," Zethrak began, his translated voice carrying the same arrogance that had marked the original ultimatum. "I am War Prime Zethrak of the 1st Inspection Fleet. We have arrived to verify your absurd claims regarding human advancement. You will provide us with detailed scans of your defensive capabilities and permit boarding parties to examine your technology." Alina stepped forward, maintaining a respectful but firm posture. "War Prime Zethrak, this is Captain Alina Vasquez. We welcome your arrival and appreciate your interest in human development. However, I believe there may be some misunderstanding about the nature of our defensive capabilities." Zethrak's compound eyes focused on her with obvious disdain. "Human, your species possessed primitive chemical rockets and barely functional life support systems when we last encountered you. Even if you have improved somewhat, you remain insignificant compared to the Corvani Empire." "I understand your position," Alina replied diplomatically. "However, before we proceed with any inspection, I feel obligated to point out that you're currently surrounded by elements of the Terran Federation's local defense grid." Zethrak's posture stiffened slightly. "Explain." Alina gestured to Torres, who activated the long-range sensor display. Suddenly, the space around the Corvani fleet began to populate with contacts. What had appeared to be empty space moments before now showed the presence of hundreds of human vessels, installations, and automated defense platforms. "The Iron Garden," Alina explained calmly, "is humanity's passive defense network. Every major shipping lane, every strategic location, every approach to inhabited systems is monitored and protected by integrated defense systems. What you're seeing represents approximately 2% of our total defensive capability in this sector alone." Zethrak stared at the display, his forearms moving in what Alina recognized from historical records as a gesture of confusion or disbelief. "This is not possible. Our sensors detected no such installations." Dr. Chen stepped forward with a slight smile. "War Prime human stealth technology has advanced considerably in the last 3 millennia. Our defensive installations use quantum masking fields that render them invisible to conventional sensors until they choose to reveal themselves." The display continued to update as more human assets declassified themselves. Massive orbital fortresses, planet-sized manufacturing complexes, and defensive platforms that dwarfed entire Corvani vessels appeared throughout the star system. The 84-ship Corvani fleet, which had seemed so impressive moments before, now appeared tiny and vulnerable in the midst of humanity's revealed defenses. "Furthermore," Alina continued, "what you're observing is purely defensive in nature. Our actual fleet assets are positioned throughout human space according to current operational requirements, as if summoned by her words." The space around the Corvani fleet shimmered as Admiral Webb's task force dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The human ships were sleek and deadly, their designs optimized for speed and firepower rather than the imposing bulk favored by the Corvani. But what truly shocked the aliens was the sheer number of vessels that continued to arrive. 137 ships, Torres announced quietly. Admiral Webb's entire battle group is now present. Zethrak's translator struggled with what sounded like several untranslatable Corvani profanities before settling on, "How many vessels does your species possess?" Alina exchanged glances with Chen before answering. War Prime, the current active inventory of the Terran Federation Navy includes approximately 57,000 combat vessels of various classifications. This represents roughly 12% of our total shipbuilding capacity. The alien commander stood in stunned silence for several long moments. Alina could see him processing the implications of what he was hearing. His empire, which had dominated this region of space for millennia, had been quietly surpassed by a species they had dismissed as irrelevant. "Your data was accurate," Zethrak said finally, his voice carrying a note of something Alina couldn't quite identify. Respect, fear, amazement. "Yes," Alina replied simply. "Humanity has spent 3,000 years growing, learning, and exploring. We've encountered dozens of other species, formed alliances, shared knowledge, and continued to push the boundaries of what's possible. We've never stopped moving forward." Admiral Webb's voice came through the communication channel. "War Prime Zethrak, this is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Federation Navy. Captain Vasquez has provided you with an accurate assessment of human capabilities. However, I want to make something perfectly clear." Zethrak turned his attention to the Admiral's image on his display. "We have no interest in conquest or domination," Webb continued. "Humanity learned long ago that cooperation produces better results than subjugation. We're prepared to offer the Corvani Empire something far more valuable than our surrender. What do you propose?" Zethrak asked cautiously. "Partnership," Webb replied. "Your empire has 50,000 years of experience managing interstellar civilization. You've maintained stability and order across vast distances. But you've also become static, locked into patterns that prevent growth and adaptation." Alina picked up the thread. "Humanity offers dynamism, innovation, and the kind of rapid advancement that could benefit both our peoples. Instead of trying to conquer us, why not work with us? We could share our technologies, our exploration techniques, our approaches to problem solving." Chen added his voice to the proposal. "War Prime, your empire could continue to exist and prosper, but with the added benefit of human innovation and energy. Together, we could explore regions of space that neither of us could tackle alone." Zethrak stood silently for a long time, clearly wrestling with concepts that challenged everything he had believed about galactic hierarchy and civilization. Finally, he spoke. "This is not how conquest is supposed to proceed," he said. And Alina was surprised to hear what sounded like relief in his translated voice. "War Prime," Alina said gently, "perhaps it's time to consider that conquest isn't the only path forward. Humanity learned that lesson centuries ago. The strongest civilizations are built through cooperation, not domination." As the Corvani fleet began to power down their weapon systems, Alina realized that this encounter would mark the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. Two very different approaches to civilization were about to learn from each other, and the results would reshape the galaxy in ways that neither species could fully imagine. The age of human isolation was over, but instead of ending in war, it was beginning with the promise of partnership between the ancient and the dynamic, the stable and the innovative. The Corvani had awakened from their long peace to discover that the galaxy had changed, and perhaps it was time for them to change as well. Asterisk.